Welcome to Unscripted with Russo. I'm your host, Ashley Russo, president and executive producer of The Peak TV. For our podcast, we decided to explore the people behind the narratives. I'll introduce decision makers and influencers who are winners in their field and find out the intimate story behind their rise to success. Hey everybody, welcome to Unscripted with Russo. I am here with a great friend today and probably, I don't know if I'd say more importantly, but equally important, our business coach, Shawn Kent Hayashi. You're the owner and founder of the Professional Development Group, and you keep ASR Media on the straight and narrow. That's how I describe it anyway. So thanks for being here, Shawn.
I am so happy to be here today, and what a pleasure to be able to work with your team. You have put together such a great group of people, and they really understand play to people's strengths, cover their blind spots, and do so without resentment, which is one of my mottos for helping to create high-performing teams. And the energy here is fabulous.
Thank you. I love it. And it's been fun. I think it's a journey. People don't always understand what, business coaching is or professional development is. And it seems to be something it's been around for a long time, but it's catching on in different sectors. I don't know if you see more young people getting involved or companies investing in young people in that way. But I want to get a little bit more into the company in a little while. First, I want to learn a little bit more about you. So tell me about where you grew up and a little bit about kind of your family structure.
Sure. So the question of where I grew up is one that immediately elicits the reality that I have a very unusual childhood. I didn't live anywhere long enough to grow up there.
Interesting.
So I moved all over the country, the United States, as a young person. My family moved every typically year to year and a half. And inevitably people will say, oh, was your father in the military? Nope, my father was a forester. And so that created...
I think you might be the first person I know that had someone in their family be a forester. What does that mean?
So he would look at a state and how the natural resources in that state were used. So he could go look at a tract of timber, for example, a wild land, something, and figure out how can we best utilize these natural resources and this timber.
Interesting.
So,
yeah, that's really interesting. So you moved around because he was evaluating different natural landscapes?
So I'll give you an example. At one point, when I was between first and second grade, kindergarten and first grade, my family lived on an island called Isle Royal in the middle of Lake Superior. My father was calculating the amount of vegetation that moose eat and what the impact would be of having moose populations. And so my family was the only family there. We lived in a tent. Our food and other things would be drop shipped in on us.
Get out of
each
here.
week. So, those movies like The Call of the Wild or whatever, I remember thinking, oh, that's nothing. I lived like that when I saw some of those kinds of movies.
That is absolutely fascinating. Do you have siblings in this model?
So I am the oldest of 4 children, and we're all 5 years apart. So my sister and I were the 2 that lived through those experiences. I think it's remarkable that when I started college, my parents moved back to their hometown where I was born, and they lived there the rest of... So it was only during my first 16 years of life.
So after they raised their family, sort of the opposite of what people would think, right? Most people stay stable somewhere with their kids and then move all over or travel or do something, and you sort of have the inversion of that.
But because we're all 5 years apart, I was 16 when my youngest brother was born. So he actually only knew really living in one place. And we have very different childhoods. I think of myself, Ashley, as an only child. While I can enjoy and appreciate my siblings for who they are, I was really formed as an only child.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and I can understand that given the nature of what that experience must have been like. Is there anything in particular, a story or a memory or something that you find particularly unique to your childhood? I mean, certainly living in a tent and having things drop shipped. And I have to say, for people who don't know you, you are the consummate professional. You are a wonderful friend. You're always elegant. I just can't even see you, even at 7, in a tent on an island. So that's kind of cool too.
When they hear that I can put I can pitch a tent very fast. I can build a fire really fast. They think I am teasing. That, like, there is just no way who I am today would do that.
I like that. That's sort of how I felt. I had about 5 years where I had kind of a beat up pickup truck as my weekend car when the kids were a little younger. And that's how I would feel in the pickup truck, because I would be dressed sometimes very fancy for work, and I would get out of a pickup truck, and it always elicited a response where people say, "You own a pickup truck?" So I get it a little bit.
Yeah. There are definitely those kinds of juxtapositions in my childhood. So born in Alabama, literally lived all over the country, traveled all over the world as a young person. And so some of those juxtapositions are quite sharp. But what they meant for me is that I learned to adapt to change, and I learned to adapt to different cultures very quickly. I learned if I didn't make friends fast, I wasn't going to have any. And I think that is a useful skill that I developed in my childhood.
Yeah, people worry often so much about putting any kind of adversity in their kid's path or any kind of change they might have to react to. We try to make everything so peaceful and calm, and yet it's interesting. I define a lot of who I am from, having a childhood with divorced parents and shuttling back and forth and having step parents and extra siblings, and it was a lot of chaos and sort of trying to adapt to it, and also find my center in the middle of it. So in a lot of ways, I think that there's a lot to be gained from a little upheaval in your youth.
We learn that we are strong and that we are capable during those challenging times in our lives. And I intentionally moved my son at one point when he was going into 9th grade so that he had to make new friends and had to adapt to a new culture. I wanted him to have that experience as a young person, because otherwise I think going into college could have been really challenging.
Right, absolutely. Was there any one place that sticks out for you as a favorite?
Oh, absolutely. I love Savannah, Georgia. Now, there are a bunch of people that will tell you when you're 10 years old, you look around at what's going on in the world and you say, this is how life is. Mm-hmm. And for me, I lived on beautiful island right off of Savannah, Georgia, and it was just a really nice time in my family's life.
Have you been back? Is it a place you visited?
I have been back since, and of course there was a point in my life where I thought, I'm returning there. I'm going to go buy the house we used to live in. And from that experience, I realized you can't return to.
Right, there's so many factors in that moment in
That's
time.
right.
Yeah, interesting. So what about education? I would imagine you talked about making new friends, you move around. Were there any other hobbies or interests or things you did as a child? What were you into?
Dogs. I have a great passion for dogs, and I can see that it comes right out of my childhood. When I was very young, we moved from Georgia to Connecticut, and at that time, my father was going to be going to Yale to school, and we were going to be living in very tiny housing, so I was not able to bring my dog with me. And that was a very painful moment. I can remember having to walk to the neighbor's house to give them my dog and the tears running down my face. But
that's heartbreaking.
I know it was. But somehow I wired it up in my mind that when I had a home and when I had a family that was stable, there would be a dog included in that mix. And so for several years, I begged to be able to get a dog. And then I said, if I learn how to obedience train it, and I learn how to groom it, and I learn how to all those other things, can I please have a dog? And that was finally the moment where I was able to pick out, I ended up getting a show dog and learned how to show and groom and all that. And so I really loved it. And then I worked for a breeding kennel. And then my first little business that I started was called Perfect Pet Pickers. And
I love it.
I would help families to identify the right pet, the right breed of dog for them. And then I would help choose that puppy, help housebreak it, obedience train it, and so forth. So these were actually seeds, you might say.
I was just going to say, so it's so interesting knowing about your business and what you do for businesses and with leaders. I would think that that was the groundwork of learning the family dynamic, learning the personalities involved and what type of dog and what kind of dog would fit It's sort of like hiring.
It's what will fit in your culture, and then how do we train?
And how old are you when you're doing something like that?
So I actually started that as a teenager.
Okay.
So at 13, 14, 15, I was...
So you had an entrepreneurial spirit.
Oh, very much
dogs
so.
was your focus. Now, what about school? Were you a good student? Were you musical? Did you do anything, sports, anything like that?
So, yes, in that because I moved so often, I had to really stay up on. There is a story that I think describes this well. When I was 6 years old, my grandmother put a globe in front of me and asked me where I wanted to go when I turned 14. Well, at that time, I was in a public school in New Haven, Connecticut, and a little girl from Japan had just joined our classroom. And so I said that I wanted to go to Japan because I thought that that meant that I would then be able to help her make friends. So you can see how some of all this comes together. And then my grandmother began to host Japanese PhD students to live in her home. In exchange for, when I turned 14, I would get to go stay in their homes. And so culturally, it's very humorous to me when you look back through our family albums, you see holiday meals and always include an Asian man. And of course, fast forward, I'm now married to an Asian man.
I was just gonna say.
So every day includes an Asian man for me.
I did not know that little piece. That's
That is
very
a very
interesting.
interesting little twist in the story here. But my grandmother was a science librarian at several universities, and so she was very she put college admissions brochures in front of me at an age when most kids had no clue what college admissions brochures were. So both of my grandmothers had master's degrees and earned their own way. And so this model was just seeped in me at a very young age.
Interesting. And my grandmother also, one grandmother had a master's degree as well. And I think that that's it's amazing the tone it sets for the family, and particularly the women in the family. And it's a neat thing to be able to say you had that.
Yes.
And adds an influence. All right, well, we're going to take a break, but when we come back from the break, I want to talk a little bit about what happens when you go to college, your degree, what it sparks in you. You go on to get your Master's of Science, I believe, and how you launch this amazing business. So we are here with Shawn Hayashi, the founder and CEO of the Professional Development Group. Stick with us. We will be right back after this break. Home to the Iron Pigs in Dorney Park, Allentown is a city without limits. Food, art, dance, you name it, it's got it. Allentown's historic roots are matched with its vibrant culture to create an adventure that you'll never forget. Thinking of taking a trip? Follow Lehigh Valley, PA on Instagram, and you'll find attractions, hotels, and sites you won't want to miss. Welcome back to Unscripted. I am here with Shawn Hayashi from the Professional Development Group, and we've been hearing about your fascinating childhood, moving all over the place. You're quick to pitch a tent. You can build a fire. You had a dream of going to Japan. Did your grandmother take you to Japan? Did that happen?
It did, and I got to go and study in Japan. So while my classmates were in school here, I went to Japan and got to attend an English-speaking school and a variety of other schools, got to tour, stay in private homes, which was unheard of at this time.
And how long were you there?
I was there for a month.
Wow, fascinating. Very interesting. And what do you think you took from that experience? Did it spark anything in you personally or professionally that you thought, I mean, I know you're 14, but that's the age, maybe you start thinking about what you're going to do with your life.
So I had amazing experiences there. For example, I would walk into a restaurant, and because I'm a redhead with cream-colored skin and freckles and brown eyes, babies would literally start crying. So I got to feel what it was like to be in the minority. I got to experience just dramatic cultural differences. And I think that's something that has stuck with me all my life, is a respect for difference and the ability to interpret cultural norms very easily because of so many life experiences like that I had.
Fascinating.
So, another one in terms of realizing I wanted to study and I wanted to have different experiences. At one point, I went to the University of Madrid to school so that I could really seep myself into Spanish culture.
I love that. And so you seek out those experiences, and it did really help develop who you are. Mm-hmm. You go off to college, Susquehanna University, and you study English. Why English? And
so I had parents who were not business people. And so I didn't have a role model for the options. But I was good with words. So linguistically, I could pick things up very quickly. And so when I was asked what I was going to major in, it just seemed like the right answer was English. But as I got farther into it, when I began to realize, what do people do with an English degree? The truth is you can do anything with an English degree. But people assumed that it meant that I was going to teach.
It's interesting, though, my husband has an English degree and went into medicine. And I think that it's a fabulous foundational degree for a number of reasons, especially nowadays with social media and the lost art of writing and things like that. But how have you found it to be foundationally in your career, in your life now? Do you still find value?
Yes, I'm very grateful that I did it. In many ways, it came easily to me. And so because of that, I was able to be confident about my ability to learn. And while I was in college, I would frequently say to people, I'm in college to learn how to learn. Because if I can really master learning, then I can learn anything I want to learn in the future.
That's an awesome way to look at it. I think we need more of that.
Well, and I think if we will embrace that our life experience is really about taking in learning from those experiences and then moving forward in a larger, expanded capacity way. And when we start to think that way, we collect experiences, opportunities, relationships that help us grow. And certainly creating a business like the Professional Development Group, this is all about helping people expand their capacities.
When you got out of school, did you go immediately for your master's, or did you work? What happened next?
So I tongue-in-cheek say I did the logical thing with an English degree. I became a stockbroker. I moved to Philadelphia and had the opportunity to work for a regional brokerage firm, Alex Brown and Sons. And then
that's a really 90.
That's right.
Yeah.
Lots of curveballs there. And I think, frankly, people who have done the work to figure out what am I really good at have often made some of these
they've
kinds of...
tried different things.
Yeah.
How long did you do it for, and what did you learn from that experience?
So I was there for 3 years, and there were aspects of that I really loved. I learned about the importance of saving and planning for your future. And over time, I've created a little program that I call Harmonic Wealth, which is about how to create a life that has abundance in all the major areas of your life. And certainly how we handle our money and our investments is one component of that.
That's really cool. And when did you start to realize that there was something else you wanted to do?
My boss gave me the opportunity to work with a coach. And that particular coach's process included a 7-day intensive workshop. It started at 6 in the morning and ended at midnight. It was
7 days?
7 days.
Eee.
And it was called Psycholinguistics, the language of the mind. And in it, he taught how to people read, how to identify not only your own thought processes, but also other people's thought processes. And this is where I first began to learn about communication styles, motivators, competencies, skills, the interplay of all of these together, and how they impact what we do, what we're great at. And so this particular coach also had as part of the process that you had a weekly coaching call with him. And in that call, he would ask the question, what are you passionate about? What makes you feel most alive? What gets you jazzed up? And each time you'd answer this question, and over a period of time, he could look at my answers. And finally, one day he said to me, Shawn, Have you ever heard of the field called training and development? I said no.
Nope.
I had no clue what he was talking about. And the internet didn't exist for me back then. And so he said, I want you to go research and I want you to explore. And he put his hands together. He interlocked his fingers together. And he said, you're going to have to bridge from where you are to where you want to go. But you belong in the field of helping people develop their skills as learners because you are such a passionate learner. You see, I was known as the person who would devour business books and then come back into the office place and teach people what I had learned. The senior leaders in my organization would put a book on my desk and say to me, please read that and write a summary for me. Well,
You were writing Cliff Notes for
I was writing Cliff Notes for the popular business books for years. And I think all of that came together in this decision that
What
I
an
made.
amazing gift, though. And it shows, I think, one of the things I often feel a responsibility for in building a business and having especially young people starting out is providing them with opportunities to learn more about themselves. And I always try to say, ASR Media does not have to be your final resting place. It's okay if we're a stop along the way. Help me understand where you want to go, what you want to do, and I'll give you the resources to try to get there and develop other skills along the way. So, because I had instrumental people like that as well. Was this someone you stayed in touch with?
So yes, the coach was certainly instrumental in my life. And as I made the decision to move into the field of training and development and then realized I need to go to work for a company that specializes in this, which is what I did do. And over time, I was leading courses at IBM, GE, Conrail. In other words, all of their major clients, I was leading their courses for. So they taught me how to lead 10 different skill building seminars that were wildly popular at that time.
And something that is interesting is you were teaching at these larger organizations, which of course I would imagine had to have been a great opportunity. But as you developed your business, how important were the smaller businesses or the individual leaders? Because one of the things I like a lot about what you do is I feel like you give opportunity for a small business or an individual to learn from your methods. It's not like you have to be underwritten by whatever giant company someone may work for.
Ashley, I feel very grateful for the opportunity to work with people from all different types of businesses. The key for me is that I'm looking for, or I connect best with the clients who are passionate about expanding their capabilities. When somebody says, I'm ready to grow, I want to be able to do more, I want my worldview, my abilities as a leader to grow and expand, that's the right connection for me. So it's not about the size of the organization or revenue, those kinds of things. It's really about the individual who's ready to grow. And oftentimes my coaching clients are people who are either putting together new teams or perhaps they've inherited a team that's not functioning as well as they'd like it to. And so we help them build high-performing teams and have the skill set to transform, create a growth trajectory for any type of business.
Well, that is the perfect setup for us to take our second commercial break, because we're going to come back with Shawn Hayashi and learn more about the Professional Development Group, what coaching really is, and some of the highlights of your career, because you've written, what are we now, 8 books?
I'm working on my 8th.
8th book in progress. So we want to hear more about that. All right, stay tuned. We'll be right back with Unscripted. As a mother of 2, I know it can be tough to find activities that everyone will enjoy. Luckily, the Lehigh Valley has so many ways to treat your family without breaking the bank. You can experience cool discoveries at the Da Vinci Science Center or all aboard the WKNS railroad train for an afternoon adventure. There's fun around every corner of the Lehigh Valley, and you can uncover it all on Discover Lehigh Valley's website. Visit discoverlehighvalley.com for more information. All right, you're listening to Unscripted with Russo, and I am here with my dear friend and business coach, Shawn Kent Hayashi. She is the founder of the Professional Development Group. Shawn, you were laying the groundwork in the previous session about sort of what professional development is. I want to ask you a little bit about, you talked to us kind of about the sweet spot of when a leader or an organization is really ready to learn and grow, how that jazzes you up. Talk to me a little bit about these various components, because I think a lot of us know about things like Myers-Briggs or DISC, which is one way of assessing someone, but you bring a lot of things to the table that I found new, such as what motivates someone, your EQ, right, your emotional quotient. Why are those important pieces to the puzzle, and why do you bring them into your practice?
Sure. So when I am doing an assessment on an individual, I want to understand their preferred communication style. I want to understand their drivers, their motivators, what they value. I also want to see their competency hierarchy, and so we measure 25 different competencies, and we can show an individual what they really already excel at, as well as where their blind spots are.
And those can change, correct? Like over time, you have some control over the improvement of competencies.
Absolutely. In fact, much of my work as a coach is about helping people to develop specific skills.
I know that, Katie Wallace Santana, our director of photography, who I think a lot of our audience is familiar with, has been with ASR from the very beginning. So she's in her 7th year now. And we did coaching with you about 4 years ago, and then we just did assessments recently. And I know for her personally, it was really awesome to see from, say, I don't know, maybe she was 25, now she's 29, how her competencies had grown. And I think the idea of sticking with a coach and following over time, maybe it's not something you do every week, year in, year out, but over time to see the growth is kind of neat.
Sure. Well, the other piece of my coaching process includes a 360. So I get feedback about an individual from people all around them. It could be their bosses, their peers, their colleagues, people who manage them. And so with the assessment and the 360, we're then able to identify very specific capabilities and then focus on those. We roll up our sleeves and get to work on them. So one example of that was a woman who ran a major division of a household name company, and her empathy was very low. Her emotional intelligence was extremely low. And people, therefore, didn't feel that they could get connected to her. We don't really trust people until we know how they deal with their emotions, until we know how they deal with conflict. And she just wasn't. And so through the coaching process, where she really learned about her own emotional intelligence and we expanded her capacity, we could dramatically demonstrate her growth from using these assessments.
Yeah, we seem to be so focused now. I really do think in raising kids and seeing kids go through school, we're so focused on skills and intellect and competencies that I think we undervalue the idea of emotional intelligence, motivators, and the way we see the world around us, although I think it's changing. To me, and I don't know if you see this trend, but I'd like to know your thoughts on it. I feel that one of the best things the millennial generation, and now, what are we calling the next one? Gen Z? Is that right, Dakota? It's your generation, isn't it?
No, I'm a millennial.
You are?
I'm
Wow.
like the very
You're the cusp. You're the cusp. We're talking to our producer here, Dakota. But they are bringing a different, more sophisticated level of EQ, it seems, to the workplace. And I don't know if it's because of partially the way we're teaching in school and what I know that my kids grew up with a peace bench when they were in preschool. That was a normal thing in their development. I didn't have that. So are you seeing a shift with the generations?
I am seeing that people are more capable in identifying and using their emotions to inform their actions. And once a person has gone through that learning process, whether it's as a teenager or a young adult, or some of us 50s, 60s, whatever, once we've gotten that learning, we own that, and our capacity now has expanded. And so I appreciate what you're saying, that your children got the opportunity to have a peace bench. With my son, I used these tools and helped him to learn how to identify, what are you feeling right now? Let's talk that out. When we feel anger, anger is a signal that something is crossing our boundaries. And we need to listen to ourselves. We need to understand and ask the question, what are my boundaries and who do I need to talk to clean that up? Or when we're feeling sad, sadness is a very healthy emotion that helps us to understand that we've lost something that's meaningful to us. So sadness can point us to what we deeply value and where meaning is in our lives. And so when we understand the emotions and how to use them and what questions to ask ourselves when we catch ourselves feeling an emotion, then the beauty of it is we don't have to get stuck in that emotion. I'm sure you can think of somebody who is just stuck perpetually in anger or fear or sadness. Those are folks who haven't learned how to process themselves through their emotions, and their capacity at an emotional level is very stunted. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, I am seeing that young people are, many of them, being more sophisticated about how to use their emotions, how to process through them, and not getting stuck in them.
It seems to be a conversation that happens more readily in the world around us, especially in education with younger kids. And we just did a piece for United Way on trauma-informed schools, and this idea of the trauma that kids are going through. And what they're doing is they're really training teachers to be in touch with what might be the root cause of trauma, and getting in touch with the emotional component of that with students. And the results are unbelievable.
See, and that's what I do in the workplace.
Right.
So I'll work with an individual and then typically work with their team, and we will help to create the culture that really identifies what is your talent? How can we best bring that to work? How can we leverage that to create a high-performing team? So that same concept I'm doing in the workplace. Businesses of all sizes.
So helpful for anybody who hasn't ever used a business coach. Of course, I highly recommend Shawn, but it is such a great process. What do you want people to know about your business and the professional development group, of what kind of things that you offer and the kind of person or people that you help?
So we work with leaders who want to grow their businesses through high-performing teams. And we are passionate about helping businesses grow. So all of the tools, the structure, the support, the accountability that enables that to happen, we bring to our client relationships.
And on a personal level, for people who are fearful of taking that step, what would be your message to someone just about, I guess, what it's like to work with you and what they'll discover about themselves and why it's worth taking that leap?
Sure. So fear is an emotion that really has two faces. So one face of fear is we're doing something really crazy and we need to stop what we're doing. If I'm driving 80 miles an hour in a 30 mile an hour zone, I want to feel fear because I want it to stop me. If I'm about to drink cloudy water in Mexico, I want to feel fear. So we really don't want to shut off fear. We want to channel it and know how to use it. So you just asked me, what would I say to somebody who's feeling afraid of working with a coach? And the key to this is, are you doing something that you need to stop doing? Is working with a coach something you need to stop? Chances are no. It's actually an opportunity for you to learn. So the second face of fear, we feel fear when we don't know how to do something. And so if we're asked to take on a new project, learn a new software package, any number of things, it can trigger us to feel fear. And that's exactly when we need to lean into learning. And so figuring out, how do you learn best? Some people learn best by talking things out, by working in a social group, by having a coach who can hold them accountable. And if that's your learning style, you will benefit immensely from working with a coach.
Well, we have certainly benefited immensely at ASR, and I feel like we've only scratched the surface. There's so much to do, and it's really valuable. And of course, I just appreciate all that you do for us and for our community, and thank you for being here today. But before I let you go, we do a rapid fire series of questions. I want to remind the audience that Shawn has not been given these questions in advance. These are truly just from her heart, from her head, and in the moment. All right, you ready? If you were an ice cream flavor, what would you be and why?
So there's a ice cream shop in my neighborhood called Mystical Treats, and they have a dinosaur ice cream that has all kinds of chocolate fun things going on in it. And I love it because it's got so much variety. It's something I've never seen before. It's completely unique, and I just thoroughly enjoy it.
And it represents you.
I like it.
I like
Mystical Treats with a whole bunch of S's at the end. And when I ask him, why did you name it Treats? He says, because I could. Don't you just love that spirit, the entrepreneurial spirit
That's
alive?
right. He could do it, so he did it. All right, if you could pick up a certain skill instantly, what would it be? What would be a skill you would like quickly that you don't have?
I would love to speak French, but I don't want to have to do all the work.
Honest answer. All right, you've written a number of books. What would the title of your autobiography be?
I'm working on something similar right now, and I think that it's about when the expectations that you had for yourself have been met, what you do next. So many of us as leaders, we grow, we accomplish our goals, and then it's important to take that next step and say, how can I give back? How can I mentor others? How can I help other people grow in a way that supports creating?
So maybe it's what's next.
It could be what's next.
Could be, okay. All right, if you could have 3 guests to dinner, who would they be?
3 guests to dinner. Well, I always enjoy having you to dinner. It's always a great conversation when I do. Let's see, I host a lot of dinner parties because I really enjoy
And you bring people together, and not necessarily people that naturally migrate together.
That's right. I try to intentionally bring together people who will be enriched by having met somebody completely different. And so I know lots of people in my community that I just thoroughly enjoy having dinner parties. So, of course, their names are running through my mind right now that I would just be happy to hang out. But I love dinner parties, so yeah.
Any guests you find a way to connect?
Ken and Ann Rampolla are always great fun. I'm sure you know them.
Absolutely.
Yes. So
Our Lost Tavern Brewing friends.
That's right. And so I always love that they're doing something creative, adventurous, fun, inspiring. And I find myself saying, hey, I want to do that too. I'm going to figure that out. So I think the guests that I invite to dinner are people who are open to sharing the adventures that they're creating. And as a result, it inspires me to say, hey, I'm going to try that too.
And that's why I love dinner at your house, because I love dinner parties for the same reason. All right, what is the best place you've ever traveled to?
The best place I have ever traveled to. Wow, I've been all over the place. Let's see, something that really stands out for me. I always love Savannah, Georgia. I go back to that in my heart just because of my experiences as a young child. But I can think about being in the Andes in South America. There was a gorgeous retreat space. I took a bunch of MBA students on a trip, and we went to Chile and Argentina. And there are some moments in that experience with all those MBA students that I just really loved.
Is there a place you've never been that you hope to go? Top of your bucket list.
I would love to go to Tahiti, but I don't know that I want to deal with the airplane trip to get there. So it's back to that question you asked a minute ago. If I could just poof into having French, if I could just poof into being in Tahiti.
Well, I was going to ask you what superpower, but maybe you would need
That's
the
it.
superpower to
The
transport.
poofing.
Yeah. I love it. Well, Shawn Hayashi, it's been awesome having you here on Unscripted. It's the professional development group. We wish you well, and we thank you for sharing your insights about your life and your coaching, and we hope to have you back sometime.
Well, thank you for having me today. I always enjoy our time together, Ashley, and we will say to be continued.
Sounds good. All right, everybody, you've been listening to Unscripted with Russo. Until next time.